This is a remarkable man that we are going to talk about today. This is a picture of him when he was 73 years old. He lived to be 90 years old. So, you know, he was still very active. And I told you a moment ago that he was a remarkable phenomenon in painting. He was not only very creative and perhaps somewhat controversial as an artist, particularly at the beginning, but he was a unique phenomenon for very many reasons, including the fact that he's probably the only painter that became a billionaire during his lifetime. I think there is nobody else in the history of art that when the time came to depart this world owned more than £1 billion in his bank account and innumerable other assets. That is, as you know, very rare in the actual life of painters. They become famous after his after their death. As you know, for example, Van Gogh, which is another remarkable painter, on which as I mentioned to you a moment ago, I wrote a book some time back. During his lifetime, he sold one painting for 200 francs, and he died penniless. Yet today, so that you have an idea of, I don't know quite how we got there, but we have to go back a little bit. That's Picasso at 26 years of age. But so that you have an idea of the value of Picasso's work today and why this man is unreal as a human being, and why it is that the people that related to him became somewhat unreal as well. They were related to a semigod, really, in a manner of speaking. Of the 20 most expensive paintings in the world today, which are valued at $4 billion, that means over $200 million, at least $200 million a piece. 6 are by Vincent van Gogh and 7 are by Picasso. That's a remarkable phenomenon, isn't it? Now here, he's 26 years old, and so that you know, he was born in Malaga, in Spain. That's in the south of Spain. It's the Andalusian provinces in Spain, and he was born in October of 1881, and he will die in 1973 at the age of 91 years. His father's name, and this is of interest, was Jose Ruiz, and he was a teacher of painting, and indeed he was Picasso's teacher. He taught Picasso to paint. But as you will see, Picasso was a great master by the age of 14 years of age. And you will see how that happened, and how I can say that he was a great master painter at that age. Up to that point, he had been taught by his father, essentially. And this is important, as it is important to know that Jose Ruiz is the name of his father. Picasso was his mother's maiden name. That was not his father's name. And that's his mother. Her family name was Picasso. Now that in itself is interesting, because his true name, Picasso's true name, when he was born, was Pablo Ruiz Picasso. In this country, he would have been called Pablo Ruiz, not Picasso. He changed his name. And I say that because in Spain, like in most Latin American countries, they have two family names. The first one, Ruiz, is the name of the father. The second one, Picasso, will be the name of the mother. So he would have been properly called Pablo Ruiz Picasso. He changed his name to Picasso, and you could ask why. He gave some explanations about this. I don't believe any one of them is true, but I will tell you what I think happened. So he had two sisters. Picasso had two sisters when he was a little boy, the younger of which of these sisters died of diphtheria when she was 6 years old. Picasso was at the time 10 years old. Picasso, our painter, our 10-year-old painter, offered to God at the time to stop painting, the thing he most liked to do, if God will spare his sister, the little sister that was 6 years old, as I told you. Unfortunately, Conchita, that was the name of the sister, died. God did not spare her at all. And I think this event changed Picasso's life dramatically in many ways. This was a very religious family, as indeed were most families in Spain at the times that we are talking of. They were Catholic, and ardent Catholics, and so was he and his family. He obviously turned away from God somewhat, that had failed him, and did not save the life of his little sister after his offering to give up the thing that he most loved and for which he has most talent, which was painting. Now, as a result of that, his father became enormously depressed when this little girl died, and the father stopped painting and became very withdrawn, which to me meant that Picasso not only did lose his little sister, but he lost his father. And he had a very special relationship to his father because Picasso was a painting genius. And his father was his teacher, and they had a very close, intimate relationship. And at this point, when the father became so deeply depressed by the loss of the youngest of his children, the daughter, Conchita, Picasso lost his father completely, essentially. In fact, his father gave up painting at that particular point. He was so depressed that he gave up painting. And of course, Picasso's story is different. It's that he was so good that his father gave up his brushes to him and said, "You are the painter, I'm nothing." But in fact, what I think happened is that, and I think that has I'm telling you this because I think that's one of the reasons why he changed his name. And instead of using his father's name, Pablo Ruiz, and then Picasso as a second name, as it will be natural to do in Spain if you're a Spanish person, he changed it to Picasso, which was the mother's name. And I think these two events are related. And I think they are significant, and we will see a little more about that. Now, by the time he was 14 years old, the family moved to Barcelona from Malaga, which is in the south of Spain. Barcelona is in the Mediterranean coast of Spain, and of course it's a much larger city, and it had one of the Royal Academies of Painting in Spain, and Picasso went there. Father found him a studio so that he could work undisturbed. He is at this point 14 years old, and that painting that you see there, he did when he was 14 years old. Isn't that remarkable? If I told you that that was anything else, a Rembrandt or a Vermeer, you say, well, you can't quite recognize it, but I see the skill of the painter. He was 40 years old. No, it's not the first painting. Now, when they moved to Barcelona, he's a year older, he's 15 years old, and he's able to complete the entrance examination to the Royal Academy of Painting in Barcelona in less than 1 day. They accepted him. That was a process, that 3 days before you were accepted for anybody else. He was accepted in 1 day. So you can put together how much talent everybody saw that this boy had at that particular point in time. In fact, the following year they moved to Madrid, where the most important Royal Academy of Painting of Spain was, and had a similar admission procedures, and he was accepted before the day was over. Procedure that took again in Madrid, like it did in Barcelona, where 30 days, generally speaking. So you can put together how much talent he has. This next painting, which is called Science and Charity, he did when he was 14 years old. Isn't that remarkable? That's all he was, 14 years old. Interestingly enough, the man that you see, the doctor, that's a portrait of his father. His father is portrayed as a doctor. And as you see, there is somebody very sick in that painting, and which looks pale and kind of close to death. And interestingly enough, there is a little girl that is being held by the nun. It's as if somehow in that picture is represented the illness of the sister that died, but in a displaced, distorted form, as indeed sometimes you will do when something is highly difficult or conflicted or difficult to express, you know. But as you see, it gives you an idea of the talent of the man at 15 years of age. Now, in 1900, he's now 19 years old, he goes to France, to Paris, with a friend, which was a poet called Casagemas, and take a studio in Montmartre. And a year later, 1901, he goes back to Madrid for a little while. And that is when he changed his signature to Picasso. Abandoned the Pablo Ruiz Picasso and became Pablo Picasso. He gave several reasons. One of them was that Picasso sounded better, was more than him like a painter and so on. But as I told you, it probably was related to the fact that it was his reaction of, in a way, sorrow and anger against a father that became withdrawn and depressed, and he lost the intimate relationship that he had with this man that was his mentor, his teacher, and his father, and obviously admired this boy like you wouldn't believe. Imagine that you are a teacher of painting and you have a boy with this kind of talent. You know, that's a remarkable relationship. In any case, he is now visiting in Spain, in Madrid, and he left his friend Casagemas, a poet, which was a young man like he was, in Paris. Unfortunately, Casagemas was not all that stable and committed suicide, while Picasso left him in Paris and went to Madrid. And he did that after attempting to kill the prostitute that he had fallen in love with and had rejected him. Incidentally, Picasso by this time was incredibly promiscuous and probably had a relationship with this prostitute as well. By 1903, he's back in Barcelona painting what is known as the Blue Period, and I will show you that in a moment, but let me first show you that's Casagemas in his coffin. And if you look closely, you can see the place where the bullet went into his head. He shot himself in the head after, as I told you, attempting to kill this prostitute that he was in love with. This is now called la vida, the life. And Casagemas is depicted naked with similar women. This woman that is kind of hanging on his shoulder is the lady that the prostitute that he had been in love with, and he had, had been rejected by. Now that is an interesting painting, because in fact there was a painting that Picasso did when he was, I think about 16 years old, or about that age, that was chosen to represent Spain in an international airfare. And that painting was sent over there and seemed to have disappeared. Everybody thought that it had disappeared. In fact, it had not disappeared. He obviously was very poor at the time, didn't have money to buy canvases. And so when Casagema died, and he wanted to paint this painting, which is kind of a memorial to his friend, and he painted several paintings of Casagema. I show you the one in the coffin. This is Casagema's with this lady. In fact, that canvas is painted over the one that went to the international fair. Would you believe it? It's a painting that won in Spain the honor of representing Spain at the International Fair of Art. He painted it over. It's in the Cleveland Museum of Art, and by, new modern techniques, nowadays and X-rays and so on, they found that the other painting is underneath this particular one. In fact, there was recently in one of the journals of the American Medical Association, I think, or the Journal of Psychiatry, an article referring to that finding. So, by now, we are in 1903, he's back in Barcelona, painting what is known as the Blue Period. And that is a typical example of it. It's life. And there you have Casagema, and you have a little baby, and this lady, then there are paintings of two lovers behind, and another canvas in there, and as I said, that's covered in a very important painting that was assumed to have been lost. Obviously, Picasso was very depressed when this happened. And as you see, these are all very depressed paintings. Blue is the color of depression. When somebody tells you, you ask them, how are you feeling? They say, I'm feeling blue. You know what they mean. And he clearly was feeling blue. This was an enormous blow to him. And he felt very guilty that knowing that Casagema was a little unstable, he left Casagemas by himself in Paris while he went back to Spain, and then Casagemas committed murder, and obviously Picasso had a certain amount of guilt of feeling responsible for it, though obviously it was not his fault. So that's one of the Blue Period. That's another one, the Tragedy. It's a poor family. It was painted in 1903. It's a National Gallery in Washington, if you want to see it. You see the sadness. Not only the colors, which are blue, the color of sadness, but if you look at these people, they are bent onto themselves like a depressed person that has a wall on their shoulders, and both of them are doing so, and the little boy is touching his father. They are a poor family. They are obviously a hungry family, and there are many such paintings. They are incredible. They are very, very valuable. They are among the most valuable paintings of Picasso, and they never come into the market any longer. Yeah. Now that is another one of the Blue Period. This is really two sisters, and that's another one. It's a lady on a chemise. And at this point, a year goes by, he's doing this work. Picasso was very prolific. He could do a lot of these paintings very quickly. By the next year, 1905 or so, 1904, he moved back to to Paris, and then he moved to Montmartre, actually, and bought, or actually, in any case, he met this lady around this time in 1904. He moved to Montmartre in Paris, and he met this lady, which is called Fernande Olivier. And this is really, as you see, the colors have changed. And this is the beginning of what is called the pink period. He got out of his depression. There is still a little blue there in the scarf, but essentially he is moving out of that particular stage in which he found himself. Now, this is something that I want to discuss with you, because Picasso was a promiscuous man. He was not faithful to any of the women in his life, and there were quite a number of them. And these are the ones that are particularly important. The one we're talking now is Fernande Olivier. That started around 1904. And as you see, there is an interrogation mark at the end, because his relationship frequently didn't last more than a few years at a time, except for his first marriage that lasted 16 years, because a woman was a saint and tolerated a lot of misbehavior. But they never ended. These women never disappeared from his life. He kept a relationship to them that you will see was incredibly interesting and peculiar and disturbing to the other women that moved into his life in the present time. This was his past. And Picasso was a hoarder, as you will see in a moment. He had a severe obsessional neurosis, and he could not dispose of anything, nothing. He could not throw away anything, and that included women that have been in his life. That's why there is an interrogation mark, because I know when it started, but it's not clearly when it ended. He carried many of these women through much of his life. The next one was a woman by the name of Eva Marcel Humbert, and that lasted 3 years. He was very attached to this girl that was a very young girl, but she died. And that affected him very, very badly, and obviously reactivated all of the conflicts that the death of his sister had created for him. That was quite a blow to him. 3 years later, though, he met Olga Koklova, which was a ballerina from the Russian ballet, and Picasso was involved in all of these activities. He was a very avant-garde kind of person. I was involved in music, art. He wrote plays. He did all kinds of things. He designed sets for ballet and things of that kind. He met this woman and married her. 1918. They separated in 1934, and his first son, called Paul, came from that marriage and was born in 1921. That relationship didn't end in 1934. The marriage ended in 1934. This woman was in his life for many more years to come, as you will see in a moment. The next one is Maria Teresa Walter, and that came into his life very shortly after Olga. Obviously, he had been having an affair with her in 1935. He had a daughter called Maya by this lady. And again, that started in 35, is not clearly when it ended. And I tell you a little more about it. The next was called Dora Maar, a very interesting woman. Was the next year, 1936. Again, he carried that for many years. Nobody knows when it really ended. The next one is François Guillot, and that lasted 7 years, and he got 2 children from her, one called Claude and one called Paloma. She wrote a book on Picasso called Life with Picasso. And he lived with him for 7 years and knew him real well. He was at the time 65 years old and she was 21. She was an artist as well, or a budding artist. Then when she abandoned him because she couldn't put up with him any longer, 2 years later he got with this lady Jacqueline Roque in 1955, and he stayed with her until the day he died. Indeed, he married her, and he died in 1973. So this, we will come back to them because it's important, as you will see. Now, here we are then in the Rose period. This is part of the Rose period. And as I told you, the portrait of Fernando Olivier belongs in there. And this includes this painting, which is a very famous painting called the Saltimbanquis Families, which is one of the greatest works of that pink period, extremely valuable. At this point, and we are now in 1905, Picasso is 24 years old only. He made Leo and Gertrude Stein, which were two famous American collectors, very wealthy, and the connection with them was quite an important fact for any painter. If they were interested in your painting, you had it more or less made. These were very active, very famous collectors, and everybody followed what they did. They started to buy. They were American connoisseurs of painting, and they started to buy paintings from him. So now this is another of the same period. You see, it's a mother and child. As you see, they are like circus people. Now let me talk to you a little bit about Picasso. I told you in the title, as you see, I mentioned that Picasso has an obsessional neurosis, severe obsessional neurosis, that obviously make him feel a little miserable, but he coped with it by a variety of mechanisms. Picasso was not only a very prolific painter, which he was, so that the storage of his works really posed a problem because he produced a very large amount of paintings very quickly. But beyond that, he was never able to throw anything away. Nothing. Nothing. Those are newspapers, magazine, empty boxes of matches, old clothes, rags, brooches. All of this had to be kept. He never answered any letters that he received, and he received a large number of letters, as you will imagine, but he never answered any. So they were piled up unanswered, and they were around him somewhere, but he never got rid of them either. For these reasons, it was not uncommon that once he had filled his house and studio up to the ceiling, practically, and I mean really up to the ceiling, he would just lock the place, close it, and move to a different location where the whole process was started again. And the place was full of his paintings and the rubbish of several years' accumulation. Because he had enough money to be able to do that already. Most painters couldn't afford to do that. Among that much accumulation of rubbish, painting, papers, and whatnot, Francois Guillot, the last but one of his lovers, found frequently, he's the one that gave him two children, Claude and Paloma, as you will remember, and that was between 1946 and 1953. The one I told you was 21 years old when he was 65. She occasionally, looking around this rubbish, found boxes full of gold pieces that Picasso had forgotten and left anywhere there. Further, the disorder in all these studios and all places was of a chaotic nature, with paintings that were stacked against the wall, tables loaded with brushes, and hundreds if not thousands, of empty, split open tubes of paint all over the floor. They were never picked up, they were never disposed of. As I said, when you couldn't move anymore in that place, it would lock it up, rent another place, buy it, and move into it. Let me tell you about a little episode which is very telling and shows his anal tendencies. An interesting episode that showed his strong anality was that once while he had gone on vacation, he had left a window open by accident. And by the time he came back, a whole family of pigeons had moved into the studio. He never chased them away. Everything was covered with droppings, including his paintings. As you will imagine, after a month with a large family of pigeons living in there, everything was covered. He was not bothered by this in the least, and his only comment at the time was, and this is a quote, "It makes an interesting and premeditated effect," end of quote. He occasionally kept various animals in the households where he lives, and these were dogs, birds, owls, and goats. Once he had won a goat in a lottery in a place called Valladolid, and said to Francois, that was living with him at the time, the young girl, the 21 years old girl, "If I have a little goat," and this is a quote, "I want her to be able to run around everywhere since I love her like one of my children," end of quote. So the goat was loose in the house. Or if he wanted to hurt her, he would say, "I love her more than you." Francois remarked that the adorable she-goat was in fact an Orgy goat, and Orgy goats are famous because they smell like nothing you can imagine. And he smelled like one, horrible. Further, the goat was in the habit of doing all kinds of dirty things whenever and wherever he felt like it. So the house was full of urine of goat and pieces of goat and things of that kind. One day, the Lord that was fed up to the, to the roof or a brain, gave away the filthy goat that had been imposed on her by Picasso. He gave it away to gypsies that were going by. When Picasso came home from working at the pottery, asking, "Where is my little she-goat that I love so much?" She said, "I have given you little she-goat that you love so much to a band of gypsies that passed by." He became furious, and his fury was awesome. Swearing, "You are the lowest form of human existence," he would tell her, "giving away the treasure of my heart to some filthy gypsies," adding, "I'm sure that they have carried my luck away with them." And Picasso was an extraordinary superstitious man, as all good obsessional people are. And obviously, given his extreme superstitiousness, this fact that she had given away the gold worried him enormously. This, as I just mentioned to you, is a strong characteristic of obsessional people. So that you see a little more of the difficulties of this OCD, obsessional compulsive disorder, created for him. So I told you he couldn't part with anything, and that was true of his clothing. And he could not get rid of his old clothes that were worn out with holes and moth-eaten for the most part. At the same time, he didn't want to buy any new clothes. But when he did, at Francois' insistence, they were immediately destroyed by the moths that had been feeding on the old clothes that could not be discarded. When she gave some of his old clothing to a gardener, he claimed them back and was incredibly angry with Francois that had given the old clothes to the gardener. He didn't want to part with them. And you see what's simple. He couldn't part with them. Another example of his, tightness and obviously anal tendencies was that while at Valladolid, he went out searching in the local dump and on the way there he rummaged around in any rubbish barrels that he passed by. Indeed, Francois would accompany him pushing a baby carriage where Picasso would throw whatever likely-looking pieces of junk he found. He collected junk from the dustbins and the dumps. This was Picasso. With his enormous capacity for sublimation, he was, of course, creating afterwards sculptures out of this junk that he called constructions. And he started that trend in the art world. And this was the way it was started. Now, typical problems of obsessionals with his aggressive drives. This is a typical problem of obsessionals. They have a problem with aggression. It's very clearly seen in Picasso's Death Wishes against his son, Claude, Francois' boy, the girl that was 21 when he was 65. Once this boy was born, Claude, Picasso would wake up during the night frequently and say to her, this is a quote, "My money is dead. L'argent instead of l'enfant." His French was a little confusing. And for some reason, because it was highly conflicted to him, he mixed the word for money with the word for children. So he called it l'argent rather than l'enfant. And of course, Francois didn't understand and asked what he meant. What was he saying? And he, in fact, was anxious that Claude had stopped breathing and was dead. Though Francois could hear the child breathing in the next room and said so, he insisted that that was the wind, that the child was dead, and would tell her, wake her up and shake her up and say, go, 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 and see, my money is dead. He would repeat. That would happen about twice a week at least, and frequently more than once in a given evening. He was very frightened that this child would stop breathing and die. There was no reason for that. They said that he was full of death wishes, and they come out in this form in the obsessional personalities. The same situation arose when the other child by Francois, the girl, Paloma, was born. That was her second child with Picasso. But by then, the worry had extended itself into the daytime, so that it was not only in the evening that this would happen. So he frequently would ask, where is the money, as he arrived home from wherever he was, meaning the children. If she said, in the trunk, which is where he kept his money, Picasso carried with him always a small red trunk that was where he kept something like 5 or 6 million francs. That just in case he said that he needed cigarettes or something, when people asked, why the hell do you carry that much money in that trunk? And he said, well, I mean cigarettes or something. He had 5 or 6 million francs at the very least in that place. So she would say, it is there. And furthermore, he would make them clear that he didn't mean that money, he meant the children. Yet if Francois will answer, for example, they are in the garden, he will often say, no, I mean the money in the trunk, I want to count it. He changed back to it. Since there was only one key to that trunk, and Picasso carried with him at all times, to count the money was totally unnecessary. Nobody could touch it. Nevertheless, he will force Francois to count the money, thus engaging in a ritual that at times lasted an hour, since he made constant mistake, and checking and rechecking was a never-ending task, typical of obsessional people. So I give you an idea of how this interfered with his well-being in his life, but didn't interfere at all with his art, which is interesting. Now, in 1907, he painted famous painting, which you see here. It's called the Demoiselle of Avignon, And that is around the time that he met George Braque. And the next year, he paints the first Cubist painting, which is a still life that we'll show you in a moment. And that's then developed into the Cubism movement that he and Braque developed for many years. And there are innumerable paintings of Picasso that are of that type. I don't need to tell you, those of you that have seen it, that this is a deconstruction of the human being. It's a destruction of the human being. The human face is blown apart into 5 different pieces. And an eye is over here, another one is over here, and the nose is here, one ear is over there, and the other one is here. And so it is with the whole body. He has like blown the body apart. It's a kind of deconstruction of the body. And of course the idea behind is that it was that because painting is a flat surface, and there is no perceptual depth except what you by painting straight can produce, but it's essentially a two-dimensional effort, vertical and horizontal. There is no depth. That this allows you to see the human being. It's as if you are seeing the human being from different angles. And if you were looking from here, of course, you will see the eye here. You were looking for here, the ear is over in some other place. And so that was the idea behind Cubism. In reality, this is part of Picasso's aggression. And he had an enormous amount of destructive impulsive in him. And I think it was this that God expressed in his Cubist sublimatory outlet. Instead of destroying anything, he created a whole new school of painting that became extraordinarily popular, and these paintings are incredibly valuable. So he turned what was essentially a very destructive, aggressive impulse in him that led him to destroy the human body and anything else into something that was highly admired and valuable and so on, which is an ideal form of sublimation. I show you the first such, that's the origin of Cubism, as I told you. Now, he was obviously very prolific and very capable, and he too invented collage. That's Picasso's invention. Many people doesn't know that. He started collage. And it was around that time, we are now in 1912, that he met the lady that I told you by the name of Eva. Was a young girl that only lived 3 years, and that he deeply mourned when she died. And in those days that was easy. You develop any kind of infectious disease and you were here today and gone in 3 or 4 days because you developed septicemia and there were no antibiotics, so that was a common phenomenon. She was a very young woman, but it killed everybody. So it was in 1912 then that that he created this still life, which you see there is called Still Life with Chair Canning. It's the first collage. It's in the Picasso Museum in Paris at the present time. That's another style. Now, when Eva died, 2 years later, that is in 1917, he met his first wife. That was the Russian ballerina by the name of Olga Koklova that you saw earlier. She was a dancer in the Russian ballet company. She married Olga in 1918 and moved to an expensive district in Paris near the Champs-Élysées. And this is a picture of his first wife, Olga, the ballerina. His first son, Pablo, by Olga, was born in 1921. And this is a painting of Pablo as an harlequin, which was a favorite subject of Picasso. I know that among you there are many people that are interested in art or perhaps artists themselves, look at the simplicity of the lines of that face. It's just a few lines, and it's a beautiful picture of a young boy that is a young boy. There are only a few lines in there. And that's, as you will see now in many of his paintings, is typical. He was a master at drawing, a real master at drawing. So that's the first boy, his first son, by Olga, called Pablo. Now then he painted another famous painter. Now we are in 1925, and these are called the Three Dancers. And this is in the Tate Gallery in London. It's a very, very famous painting. And if you see, let me see if I can point it out to you here. You see the arrow? Can you see the arrow? This is a portrait of a painter friend of him that had died recently by the name of Ramon Pichot. He included it there. He did that occasionally. It was like a secret thing that he put in the painting, Only he knew what that was. Interesting, in a way. Because in a way it was a way of keeping this man alive. This man would have disappeared from the face of the earth when he died. We all know who he is. And his name will be there now forever and ever. He has made him immortal. And that is another peculiarity of Picasso. And had something to do with why people related to Picasso the way they did, which was somewhat irrational, to put it mildly. And you wonder what it is that they were pursuing. You will see that at the end of his life, things turned very dramatically for many of the people that he had been relating to and were attached to him. But that's Ramon Pichot, a painter friend of him that had died recently. He included him there, and in so doing has given him life forever. So now 60 years later, he does separate from Olga, and the reason for that essentially was that he had innumerable mistresses, got tired of her, which she did, of women. And, in that, for somebody like me, an analyst, you can always trace the way he treated women. He was angry with women because he was a girl, his little sister, that caused him his relationship to his father. And in a way, he reenacted that scenario all through his life. Women owe something to him, and he paid them back consistently. This is Dora Maar, that he called the crying one. That was painted around 937, and it's in the Tate Gallery. It's a very dramatic painting, but you see what I told you before. That is an exploded human face, isn't it? It's a destroyed human face. There is a movement called constructivism. This is extractivism. And it shows aggression in a sublimated manner, and in a very controlled manner, Somebody else would have beaten the heck out of this woman. He didn't do it. He painted this painting. You understand what I mean? So, let me tell you about this woman, because this is a very interesting relationship. She's called Dora Maar, and she was a photographer. Picasso got interested in her, who obviously had a very strong masochistic character, as you will see. And Picasso chose women with masochistic characters because he had a lot of sadism in him. As at a cafe, he was in a cafe in Paris. One of the, you sit on the sidewalk there at the table and you are drinking whatever you're drinking, wine, coffee, whatever. And they were there, a group of avant-garde people, or so-called avant-garde artists and so on. And then there was this group, and there was Dora Maar, who had taken off her gloves from her hands, put her hand in the table, pick up a knife with the other hand, spread his fingers, and was to see how many times she can draw that knife into the table, punch it into the table without cutting herself. Well, I don't need to tell you that she cut her hand really badly, and in a moment, the hand was a mess. And the gloves that she had were full of blood, were bloody gloves, cut blood gloves. Picasso was fascinated by this. And though he had never met her before, he very quickly approached her and requested of her if she would give him these gloves. What do you think he did? He took them home, put it on the glass, and kept it for the rest of his life as a trophy. And he developed very quickly a sexual relationship with her. As I say, he had not known her at all, but he asked her for the gloves that she had been wearing at the time and kept them in display as a memento for the rest of his life. Dora Maar became his mistress soon afterwards, as I mentioned earlier. After the relationship ended, or rather, no relationship ended, but the actual, more sexual, intimate aspect of the relationship ended, that aspect of it. She had no life of her own. This was common for Picasso's women. Once he abandoned her, they had no life of her own, as you will see in a moment. In fact, she held herself in a state of permanent availability, so that if Picasso phoned or dropped by unexpectedly, and this may have been 5-10 years later, right? The relationship, the intimate part of the relationship was terminated. This woman is still waiting for him, and he will occasionally call and say, I'm going to dinner with you. Come. And so she kept herself in state of permanent availability, so that if Picasso phoned or dropped by unexpectedly, he will find her there. Once a painter who liked Dora and asked her to dinner one evening, she told him that she couldn't say yes or no until dinner time. We were spoiled. Why can't you say no or yes until dinner time? She explained to him that if she made a date with him and Pablo called to say he was coming to take her to dinner, he would be furious that she had made other plans. And he gave these women no notice at all, and they were willing to wait for him. Very strange. And was not an uncommon phenomenon. Now, we were talking about his aggression. Of course, he reacted very strongly to any external manifestation of aggression. So in 1937, no, actually, this is before Dora Maar, there was another woman by the name of Maria Therese Walter, with whom he had a child called Maya, which I think I showed that to you. So then later he made Dora Maar, as I told you, and I told you the story. Now in 1937, and by this time, as you know, Picasso was born in Spain. He was a Spaniard, really. There was a revolution in Spain, and he painted this very extraordinarily famous painting that is at the moment in the Prado Museum in Madrid, but was for many years in New York at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And as you see, this is a painting. It's called Guernica. Guernica was a little town in Spain that was bombed by the Germans. Spain was the practice scenario for the Second World War for the Germans and Italians. and they supported Franco, which was a general in the Spanish army, who had revolted against the Republic, which was a communist republic. And Franco won the revolution. With the help of the Germans, they bombed the city and essentially destroyed it. It was a small village and essentially destroyed it. And that's what this painting there. You see, there are limbs of people all over the place, and dead people, and a leg there, and an arm over here, and a woman crying over there to the heavens, and there is an animal here that is obviously hurt, and there is a woman trying to light the scenes, and there are all kinds of things happening. You see a dead child here with a woman crying, and so on. It's quite a document, and it made quite an impression at the particular time that, and he has this very strong reaction to any external form of aggressive manifestation, which of course reverberated very deeply in him because he had an enormous amount of aggression to contend with, and I will give you some examples of it in a moment. Now, in 1939, he had a major exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, where Guernica was there until the death of Francisco Franco. He didn't want it to go to Franco. He hated Franco. Indeed, he became a communist at some point. Pablo Picasso did. And at the death of Franco, this painting that he left on trust at the Museum of Modern Art in New York was supposed to be returned to the Prado Museum, which is probably the second best museum of paintings in the world after the Louvre. And it's nowadays exhibited there. If you ever go to Madrid, you can go and see it there. Okay, let's move on. Now, obviously, as you see, the amount of different styles and types of creative activity that he was able of is awesome. Here you have a completely different type of style, with the figures are enormously exaggerated, and yet it's a beautiful painting, right? It's two women running in the beach. All right. By now, and we are by now in 1944, he has joined the Communist Party and was exploited by Russia and the communists like you wouldn't believe. Many of the doves that you saw in those days, those of you that are old enough, were drawings of Picasso that the communists used for the propaganda all over the world. And he was, fested and all over the world because Picasso was Picasso. Yeah? Now let's look for a moment at Francois' experience. He's the last but one of his lovers. And what happened to the other women that were still in his life. Let me give you, for example, let me show you some of the other paintings so that you see. That's another that you are familiar with. Style, again, is the human figure have been essentially blown apart, destroyed and put together in bits and pieces, as you see there. It's very striking colors and all. I mean, see, the mouth is there, the eyes are there. Look at that foot. This is a lady with a yellow flower, the name of the painting. This is a lady on a red armchair. This is less distorted. This is painting that anybody would have done. There are doves there. He was very fond of painting doves. And this is a view of Antibes, a place where he frequently vacationed. All right. Let me tell you a little bit about Francois, which is the one that gave him two children, Claude and Paloma, the one that was 21 years old when he was 65 years old and stayed with him for 7 years, after which he left. after that time she left. Now, when Picasso was with her, on occasion he would take Francois to lunch with Dora Maar, the crying one, the one that once cried, who had been his mistress for 10 years, quite a few years earlier. And throughout the meal he would say to Dora, "Isn't she marvelous?" referring to Francois. "What am I?" he would say. "I have really discovered someone, haven't I?" he would say to Dora Maar. This, of course, deeply hurt Dora, that, as you see, was pending of every move of Picasso for years and years and years after the relationship was finished. She was very much still attached to him, but he continued teasing her in this way. Later on, Dora became psychotic. Dora Maar became psychotic and was somewhat delusional. Paul Lard, which was a poet, friend of both Picasso and Dora, became extremely upset about her mental breakdown and accused Picasso of being responsible for it because of the way he treated her. He really abused her tremendously, psychologically, not physically, psychologically. He had treated her so badly that she snapped finally, he will say, Paul Lard will say. Picasso counterattacked by saying that it was the surrealist ideas that were responsible for her craziness. He had nothing to do with it. He was sufficiently concerned, though, to tell his secretary, his private secretary. He had a private secretary he had most of his life, by the name of James Sabatés. Was another Catalonian, and very devoted man to him, you will see in a moment or so. This was his personal secretary, was always with him, to bring Dr. Lacan. Lacan is a famous French analyst. He's somewhat unorthodox, but a very famous analyst, which obviously Picasso saw for himself. With what frequency and so on and for how long I can't tell you, but it's clear that he saw Lacan for treatment. Or so it seems. Well, he asked Lacan to come to see Dora Maar, and of course this Lacan, Dr. Lacan immediately had her hospitalized on the spot. She was completely psychotic, delusional, and hallucinated and so on. Indeed, Lacan continued treating her until she recovered. And it seems reasonable, I think, to assume that somewhere Picasso felt responsible for her breakdown, if only because of the strong defense he mounted against the idea that her illness was his fault. So that was what Francois was exposed with Dora Maar, but was not the only one. There was Maria Teresa Walter, which was Maya's mother, the one that he had an affair after he terminated his marriage with his wife, Olga, and had that child from her called Maya. Francois was soon to discover that Picasso had a more complicated life than she had assumed, and she had assumed that it was pretty complicated. Indeed, she knew that. He dropped out of sight every Thursday and Sunday, and when asked about it, told her about going to see Marie-Thérèse Walter and Maya, which was his daughter by this woman on such days. Further, he received daily letters from Olga, his ex-wife, and from Marie-Thérèse. Marie-Thérèse wrote apparently very affectionate and passionate letters. Picasso read the most ardent passages to Francois, sighing with satisfaction and saying, quote, "Somehow I don't see you writing me a letter like that," end quote, and generally continued sadistically provoking her and reading her the letters. Francois remarked in her book, Life with Picasso, on how she had to bite her lips in order not to show her anger at him. He was a teaser, cruel teaser. Now there was Olga, the wife, and was interesting. They divorced. They didn't divorce. They separated. They never got divorced. They separated. And so Picasso kept a relationship with this woman, as you will see. Now, while they were at the village where there was a pottery, and Picasso was at this time engaged in doing pottery, they went to The place called Golf One, which is like a seaside resort, where his first wife, Olga, started to accost them in the street and at the beach. She followed them. But not accidentally, Picasso had engineered all of that. One day, Francois was sitting on the sand with her hands behind her, holding herself up. Olga came up quietly behind her and with her high heels began walking on Francois' hands. Pablo Picasso, had seen what she was up to and was roaring with laughter. Every time Francois put her hands back on the sand, Olga would walk on them. Finally, Francois grabbed Olga's foot, gave it a twist, and Olga went flat on her face in the sand. Picasso was there fighting too. He used to get the different women in her life fighting with one another, and I give you some examples of that. At least in one occasion, when Olga accosted them on the street, Picasso slapped her on the face to stop her behavior. But Picasso, in fact, was provoking much of Olga's behavior by not only letting her know where he was going, but by inviting her to come and paying for her expenses. He will then, for example, instead of pay for her hotel, he will withdraw the pay, withhold it, and so the hotelier will threaten Olga with throwing her out of the hotel unless she pay the bill. She didn't have any money, and Picasso on purpose did not pay so that she will come, and create this kind of a scenario that I am describing to you. So he will, for example, not pay Olga's hotel bill, and so that when she was threatened by being thrown out and so on, she had to come and look for him, otherwise she'd be in the street. And the reason why they were not divorced, because it would have been very costly, and Picasso would not have any part of it, and somehow he got these women to essentially do whatever it is that he wanted. At some point, because of all of this mess and all of these coming and goings and all of these women that were a part of his life, and it was a never-ending thing, Francois wanted to move to avoid all this complication. She had been bothered by the presence of Olga and her daily inappropriate behavior. She described how she requested from Picasso that they move away to a little villa called La Galois. They had been staying with some friends, the Fords. Pablo agreed, but when the time to move came, he was in a bad mood and said, quote, "I don't know why I should go through with this. If I had to move every time women started fighting over me, I wouldn't have had time for much else in my life." End of quote. Francois replied that she was not interested in fighting with anyone over him. And he would say then, quote, "Maybe you should have," he said. "I generally find that amusing," and proceeded to recount an incident while he was painting Guernica, the painting of the destruction of that villa in Spain. He said, "Dora Maar, the crying one, was with me, and Maria Therese, which is the one that gave him a daughter, Maya, dropped in, and when she found Dora there, she grew angry and said to her, 'I have a child by this man. It is my place to be here with him. You can leave right now.' Dora said, 'I have as much reason as you have to be here. I haven't borne him a child, but I don't see what a difference that makes.' I kept on painting," Picasso said, "and they kept on arguing. Finally, Maria Therese turned to me and said, 'Make up your mind. Which of us goes?' It was a hard decision," he said, "to make. I liked them both for different reasons. Maria Therese because she was sweet and gentle and did whatever I wanted her to do, and Dora because she was intelligent. I decided I had no interest in making a decision. I was satisfied with things as they were. I told them that they had to fight it out themselves." So they began to wrestle. "It is one of my choicest memories," Picasso told Francois. And to judge by the way he laughed, it was, Francois remarked in her book. Picasso, we have seen, was unable to throw anything away. even boxes of matches. Clearly he had the same problem with the many women in his life. He just couldn't part with any one of them. Now let's look a little more at his aggression and sadism and the way it shows in Picasso's art and personality. Once during an argument with Francois, the last but one of his lovers, she called him a devil. Picasso's eyes narrowed and he said scornfully, "And you are an angel, but an angel from the hot place. Since I am the devil, that makes you one of my subjects. I think I will brand you." He took the cigarette he was smoking, he was a chain smoker, and pressed it on her right cheek and held it there. Francois did not pull away as you would have expected. All these women had a strong masochistic character, as you see, it shows them well. And after what seemed like a long time, he took it away. "No," he said, "that is not a very good idea. After all, I may still want to look at you." By then he had burned her face. In another occasion, walking by the river the Siena in Paris, they got into an argument, and he threatened to throw Francois into the river, grabbing and pushing her into one of the semicircular setbacks of the bridge. If you have been in Paris, you know that from time to time there is like a balcony over the river, like you see here in by the bay. Only that there are many of those. Well, he pushed her over there, and holding her against the parapet, twisted her around so that she was facing the water. He said, "How would you like it?" he said, surprisingly, meaning if he would throw her into the water. Surprisingly, he told him to go ahead. You have to notice his sadomasochistic tendencies. That it was a spring, she said, and she was a good swimmer. When he finally let her go, she ran down into the metro, leaving Picasso behind on the bridge. At least in one occasion, Picasso flew into a rage and took the belt he was wearing. That was a gendarme-like belt. They are very thick, like a policeman belt. And buckled it and pulled it out of his trousers, holding it as if he were about to whip her. Typically, Francois laughed, which was bound to make Picasso even angrier. Francois referred as well to how Pablo went to watch with enormous fascination and much interest, as long as he was in a place called Minerves, how the large owls in the region came looking for unwary cats and rabbits to carry off in their claws. They came, caught the cats, and carried them away. There was a fight, obviously, between the owls and the cats. Picasso, remember, kept owls in his home frequently. At times, a ferocious battle ensued, lasting a fairly long time between the owl and the cat or the rabbit. Picasso would do nothing to stop the fight between the cat and the owl. He would stand there fascinated as long as the battle lasted, and he would go there every evening. According to Villette, he would make them many drawings of these afterwards. Picasso was both fascinated and horrified by the violence and sadism that he encountered at different points in his life. We can see the manifestation of his own inner violence and sadism in many of his paintings and in many of his drawings. We can see paintings of cats destroying bears and owls killing cats and so on. And let me show you some. You see, a cat there has essentially disemboweled this bird, has killed it. Look at they're aggressive. It looks like a very aggressive animal. Here is another cat with a human face, which is killing a bird. And he has any number of these things that you can see in his artistic production. We know of his fascination and passion with bullfights. He was a fan of bullfights. He went to every corrida that there was around him and indeed he was the patron of many of these corridas. And which she enjoyed tremendously, and we did attend it regularly and patronized. The more blood and gore, the better. And there are series and series of drawings and lithographs depicting these bloody events. We see attacking bulls, disemboweling the horses of the picados, and killing toreadors at the corridas. Give you one example. You see the toreador there, the head, he had been cornered, caught by the bull horns, and of course is dying. At the same time, you see this horse, bowel, is coming out of his belly because the bull has hurt him too. A lot of gore in it. There are many such things in Picasso's production. So we see attacking bulls, disemboweling the horses of the picados, and killing toreadors in the corrida. That's a good example. This one was inspired by another artist, Davis, called The Death of Marad, and he painted this called Murder in 1934. And you see the enormous knife that is being pushed into this human being here, and the distorted, violent, horrendously aggressive face of this figure. We see dying bulls wounded by the toreadors. Here you see a bull that has, a sword into his neck. That's the way they get killed in corridas. They find the right place in the medulla, and that will kill the bull. It will throw him, it makes him quadriplegic, falls, and finally dies. And that is, I don't know if you ever have seen a corrida. It's a brutal kind of thing. It's an atavism that it still exists somehow. It's one of the more brutal spectacles that you can possibly watch, And this is the way they kill these bulls, which are bred for ferociousness. They are dangerous like you wouldn't believe. Now, we see sadistic minotaurs. This is a figure that he was very fond of. This is a mixture of a bull, he has horns, and partly the face of a human being, but it's partly the head of a bull, and has the body of a human being. It is painted in different, and it has killed a young cow, and is taking it away. A minotaur is usually murdering whatever comes in his way. And clearly it's a representation of his own aggression, in a sublimated manner. He painted dying bulls. There you see them. I mean, that's a dying minotaur, and he's dying. You see the face there, and it's being killed. And that's a wounded minotaur, and that's a minotaur that has killed a young cow. We have seen too many examples of his own internal struggles and how much of this manifested itself in the way he related to others, particularly the women in his life and his cruelty and abuse of them. And above all, we can see his enormous sublimatory capacity through his art. Imagine what he would have done if he did not sublimate much of this aggression into this form of art. He may have been a serial murderer or God knows what, Now, during all this time, or much of this time, Francois was with him, but in 1953 she decided to leave him. In 1955 he moved to a villa above Cannes with Jacqueline Roque, and afterwards he married her, and they will stay together for quite a number of years until his death. And by then he was very old and was not running around as much as he had done before. That's Jacqueline Roque, the last woman in his life that he married and became his widow. His reaction to the manifestation of external sadism, to which he reverberated intensely, given his own internal problems in this area, led to what is perhaps his most famous painting in the world and the strongest pictorial manifesto against war, represented by Guernica, which is a painting that I showed you earlier. But Guernica is not the only one. There are other similar things. And years later, in 1950, he produced this one called the War and Peace paintings, as well as the Massacre in Korea, which is that one. That's during the Korean War. He painted this. But if you look closely to Guernica, this one, you find Picasso's own aggressive and sadistic fantasies portrayed in this painting. For example, the weeping woman in Guernica is really Dora Maar, which is the weeping one, and is similar to other drawings of Dora Maar. When his friend, the poet Paul Elar, accused him of having turned crazy when she went psychotic, and Maria Therese Walker is the woman holding the light. This woman here, holding the light. There are many drawings of her that, similar to that one. So as you see, even at that particular time, some of his own problems were represented pictorially. But he did what many adolescents do when they are feeling very aggressive and destructive. What they do is they externalize it. And they see violence anywhere else in the world and say, oh, we are terrible, we are killing people in Iraq, or the Russians are doing this, that, or the other, or we are killing people here in the other place, or whatever it is. And it's a way of, you look at the behavior, you say, but they are incredibly aggressive and destructive. And what they do is that they put it outside, and then it's as if you get rid of it. When I was in London working with Sana Foy at the clinic, we used to, this was the time of the peace marches, the Alderstone marches, and we saw a lot of women pushing prams with the children from Alderstone all the way to London. That took several days to do. And we knew some of these women, they were child abusers. But they were there protesting the violence of the atomic bomb. It was a ban the bomb movement. You know what I mean? And it's not that they were hypocritical or anything like that. It's that they were really struggling with their own violent tendencies, and they could not obviously control it at times with their own families, and yet they were trying to externalize it and blaming other people for their aggression and their destructiveness and so on. When he was 88, he exhibited a very large number of paintings, and everyone was astonished at his productivity at this particular age. Meanwhile, what I told you is happening all the time. Picasso could go, he liked a castle, he would go and buy with a painting. He didn't need money. He would give a painting, they would give him the castle. And it was good business for the castle owner, That painting had become to be millions of dollars worth nowadays, And so he bought villas and castles and things like that just by exchanging them with paintings. It's unreal. It's an unreal world. He was an unreal man. You wonder how he kept his sanity and how the people around him kept their sanity and kept relating to him. It's a very strange and unique situation in the artistic world. He was very active till his death, which happened on April 8 of 1973, and indeed he painted the day before his death. He died of acute pulmonary edema. And let me show you a portrait of him at that age. He was 90 there. That's in Tokyo now. This is interesting, actually, and appears in many of his paintings, and I have not discussed that because obviously you need months to talk about Picasso. But if you think the eyes are very different one from the other, yes? One has a very large pupil, the other one a very little one. He was very concerned about blind people and had done paintings of them, of course, for somebody that his life was a picture. The question of the sanity of the welfare of your eyes was very important. Now, let me tell you about what happened in the last years of Picasso. This is in 1968, 5 years before he had died. In fact, in February of 1968, Picasso's friend and secretary, this man that I told you about, Jaime Sabates, who was born like Picasso in 1881, died. In his memory, Picasso gave 58 paintings after Velázquez Las Meninas and a blue period portrait of Sabates to the Museum Picasso in Barcelona. Now, this museum was founded 15 years earlier in 1953 by Sabates' own gift of Picasso. Sabates was very badly paid by Picasso. He paid very badly his servants and this man, but occasionally he gave him a drawing or a painting or whatever it was from the world go. And so he founded the museum. Now, Picasso died in 91, as I said, and when he died, he had 1,251,663 francs in the bank. In his will, he had donated his considerable personal collection of works by Corot, Degas, Cézanne, Renoir, Rousseau, Matisse, Derain, Braque, Gris, Miro, etc. to the French state. They were worth a fortune. 4 days after Picasso's death, on April 12, he had died on April 8, his grandson Pablo committed suicide. 2 years after Picasso's death, Paul Picasso, his firstborn son by his first wife Olga, died. He was only 54 years old. 4 years after Picasso's death, in 1977, Marie-Thérèse Walter, the mother of Maya, and one of his lovers from 1927 to 36 at least, committed suicide. 13 years after Picasso's death, in 1986, Picasso's widow, Jacqueline Roch, committed suicide. She was 60 years old at that time. They had no life of their own without Picasso. That's what I wanted to tell you for today, and maybe if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them for you if I can.